improvement for your school library. And we will have Jessica Lynn Johnson joining us, who is the Farmington High School Library Media Specialist. And we have Francis Kennedy. I believe you go by Fran, right? And he is the Associate Director for Accreditation and School Improvement at NEASC. So we got two experts here with us tonight to share this really important topic. And while we're waiting, hopefully Jessica will be coming on momentarily, but I pinned some things for you. Certainly our presenters' names are in there. And also we are sharing out, I don't think it's gone out yet, but it is, tomorrow we'll start School Library Month. And, oh, here she comes, great. And so there's a toolkit in there that many CASL folks have put a lot of time and effort into and used a lot of resources from the American Association of School Librarians and some of our, and I just highlighted one thing there with all kinds of posters and quotes and just really powerful statements about how important school librarians are that Shannon McNeese put together. So let's see, Jessica.
And I am so sorry, Val. I clicked on my own calendar link and I was sitting on a Google Meet all by myself. And I had my PowerPoint or my Google presentation all up and ready to go. And I had my link pinned. Like, oh my gosh, why is no one here? And then I realized, I'm like, I'm on the wrong link. So my apologies to everyone.
No worries. It's just, I was just getting nervous. I'm like, and I was here early at 6:10 and I'm like, okay, nobody's here. Nobody's here at 6:25. I'm like, oh boy, did I send out the wrong Google Meet? So welcome everybody. Welcome officially, Jessica. I did a very basic introduction and just talked about how there are some useful things that are pinned in the chat for folks as we were waiting to officially get started. But thank you so much, Jessica and Fran, for being with us for this really important presentation. And I'm going to be quiet and let you talk. And you're going to talk first and share some slides. Hopefully that'll be showing okay, right? You can share your slides and then there will be time for question and answer at the end, but people can feel free to put questions in the chat if you like, and we'll try to pay attention to those as best we can. All right, see your screen. Thanks.
Yay. And while Fran's chatting, I will also post a link and pin to the NEASC public school standards. So Val already spent some time introducing us. So I don't know if she shared, I've done a few NEASC visits. I've shared some collaborative visits and I'm doing my first decennial visit. My own school is up for our collaborative visit in November. So we're going through the process right now of preparing for NEASC. My husband is actually one of Fran's colleagues. And Fran is here tonight because he is one of us. So I'll let him talk if he hasn't already talked a little bit about how he started off, and then he'll start off talking about the NEASC standards.
Thank you, Jessica. I was originally a school library media specialist for about 11 years, split between Connecticut and the beautiful island of Guam, where I was born, as a matter of fact. So it brought me back as a young professional. And as I tried different levels of schools, elementary, middle, and high school, I have to admit, I liked all three, but I found myself culturally and just in terms of where I felt I belonged in the profession at the high school level. So that's where I served most of my years. But at one point, I found there was a need to have an acting assistant principal, and I had my 092 certificate for a long time. So I became an assistant principal for a couple of years. And I'll just cut out everything in the middle, just tell you that I was a principal for 22 years. And then I've been with NEASC for almost 8 now, where, as Jessica said, I work with her husband. So here's what's happened. I have a very special place in my heart for the combination of NEASC and library media centers and the job of the library media specialist. Because when I was returning from Guam with my wife, we'd only been married a short time. We really wanted to come back to Connecticut so she could go to graduate school. And there's a recession back then. It was very difficult to find a job. But Stafford High School in Connecticut needed a library media specialist. Why? Because NEASC said they need to get one. There was a recommendation that I think it was worded something like rectify the lack of professional assistance and services within the school library media center and ensure it's open before and after school. So when I applied, I was one of just a few, and in the end, I was able to get that job. So I suppose without NEASC, I couldn't have been a library media specialist or a Connecticut educator for that matter, because who knows if I would have been forced out of the field entirely. So that's one thing I wanted to tell you about my background. The other is I look forward today to speaking with you about how I think the two can carry on being helpful to all of you if you are able to use them hand in hand beyond the sheer luck that I experienced. But I think over the years that I've been not only serving as a library media specialist, but supervising and evaluating them as a principal, I think I might be able to be of some assistance because I've been involved with NEASC as a volunteer for a very long time, long before I worked there. So I'll turn it back over to Jessica, and I just wanted to say it's wonderful to see other members of the Guild. There's one thing I didn't point out earlier, which is this. I believe that this organization was originally the Connecticut Educational Media Association, CEMA. And if that's the case, I was your treasurer once a while. I'm sorry, your membership director a long time ago. So,
That's correct, Fran. Yes. Connecticut
nice.
Educators Media Association.
All right, so we will jump right in. And, this is a really important topic because very much as Fran said, I was under the assumption also that when I made the jump from being an elementary school library media specialist to the high school, it was a job protection, that I was guaranteed not to lose my position because now it was a NEASC accreditation that my job was protected. And then once I became involved in NEASC, I realized that that's not so much a guarantee. The language is there, but there's some very varying interpretations of what that is, depending on the district and depending on the principals and how they want to roll that out. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But for those of you that have never had any experience with NEASC, we're going to go through just briefly, and I'll have Fran take this part over. We'll go over briefly the standards. There's 5 standards. Actually, here, we'll go through our agenda. So the first part of our presentation tonight, we'll talk about the NEASC standards. And then the second part, we'll talk about the advocacy and action. And really, truly, the advocacy and action, unpacking all of that could really be a whole day of library media specialists sitting and just brainstorming together. So there's a lot in there that we're likely not going to get to, but I think this could definitely be a follow-up at another point. So for the NEASC standards, there are 5 standards, and Fran is definitely the expert in this, so I'll let you talk about each of the standards, and we fall under standard 4.
Thank you, Jessica. If any of you have experienced NEASC prior to 2019, you might remember there were 7 standards. There are a few reasons why there are only 5, but in a nutshell, if you look at standard 2 on the screen there, that's called student learning. And at one point, that was 3 separate standards. It was divided into curriculum, instruction, and assessment of and for student learning. But we not only reduced the number of standards, but we also completely revamped them in every way to prepare for what we see as a growth model, a developmental model for schools, taking Carol Dweck's theory of the growth mindset and applying it to member schools. Standard 1 in the 2023 standards is called learning culture. And that's where it promotes shared values, the safe environment in terms of being socially, emotionally, and intellectually safe, and having a vision of the graduate and a statement of core values about beliefs about learning. Standard 2, I think I covered that pretty well, except part of standard 2 is relevant to school library media specialists in that we want students to, through that standard, lead their own learning, be be autonomous, have agency. And one way we're interested in or read for pleasure, as you well know as school librarians. Standard 3 professional practices, well, that's about you in the sense that you're a member of a faculty and you should have resources and time to collaborate and the ability to get feedback about your performance. This is also where a school growth and improvement plan would live. Standard 4 has all the services in it. So that would include the school health office, the school counselors, the pupil support such as school social work, psychology, EL, and others. Of course, the school library media center and the school library media specialists are featured in there, both the facility and the personnel. We'll get into this later, of course. And Standard 5 has to do with just learning resources. The resources within the library media center are specifically mentioned in this standard at one point, but basically it's about ensuring that the building and grounds are adequate to deliver the curriculum and co-curricular opportunities as well as student services with fidelity, and that the budgeting is there. Also, the idea of it being a physically safe school and more. So those are the 5 standards. What's important to realize too is that with the learning support, there's a specific preamble to the entire standard, and you can see it on the screen there. The school has timely, directed, and coordinated interventions for all students. The school provides targeted supports to meet school students' individual needs, including, and of course, everything I just mentioned is listed there in the preamble paragraph, library information services. If you look at the term library information services, I don't know if you use that term ever, or when you're in library school, if they ever use that term. But it's something that the commission came up with and its subcommittees when they were rewriting the standards. And that's the one thing I noticed right away when I saw the drafts of the standards. I was actually on the commission at the time, and I was wondering, where they came up with the term. It's unclear. I have to admit, I liked it. I didn't dislike it. I can certainly say that. But I do have a story to tell about the evolution of what we call 4.4. Whenever you see a decimal terminology within our standards, it's usually preceded by a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and the decimal point means it's a 1.1. That would be the first principle of effective practice within Standard 1. Therefore, with the Library Information Services principle of effective practice, that's 4.4. It's the 4th principle within the 4th standard. And there it is. I'd like to read some of this out loud to you. 4.4. All students receive library information services that support their learning from adequate, certified, licensed personnel. So that would suggest, if you looked at that it would be expected that a school would have a library media specialist, because in all 6 New England states, that is the term that's used by their bureaus of certification within their state departments of education. Moving to your right-hand side, as you see a bulleted list, those are what are called descriptors. And the descriptors are present for every one of our principles of effective practice. And they have a few purposes. One is to allow the reader of the standards to look at a principle and get an idea of what it could look like in actual practice. Also, the descriptors are a way for a school to determine their degree of alignment with the principle of effective practice. So if a school, looking at the list here, had nearly all of these except for maybe one, they might say, well, we're substantially aligned with principle 4.4. We're nearly completely aligned. If you notice that the school only met 1 or 2, obviously they'd be just beginning their work on alignment. But one thing to keep in mind about the principles of effective practice, there are 32 of them. Every single one of the standards, all 5, have several within them. So I'll cross those 32. They are written to be aspirational. In other words, it is not an expectation of NEASC on the whole for the term of continued accreditation that all of our member schools align with every single part of the principles of effective practice. Therefore, what you're looking at here in the standards is not really trying to say that if you don't have full alignment with this, you're going to lose your accreditation. Uh, and I'll comment on this more, but that was really never the case. And I can probably explain why I ended up getting hired as a library media specialist during the recession, and why the schools thought that if they didn't hire me, then there would be difficulty with their accreditation. But more on that later. Looking at the principles there, you once again have adequate certified licensed personnel and have support staff. Then the next 4 bullets in the first section, ensuring that the personnel and staff are actively engaged in the implementation of the school's curriculum and instructional practices, and that they support teachers in enhancing student learning. Now, there's something that a paraprofessional or paraeducator cannot possibly do. How does a non-licensed individual, as well-meaning and as well-versed in the school library as they may be, help another teacher? This is supposed to be about teachers helping teachers here. Looking at the 3rd bullet down, providing professional support to classroom teachers. Again, providing professional support to classroom teachers to ensure high quality instruction on information literacy, research techniques, citing sources, etc. The last 2 bullets are about what the unique assistance that library media specialists provide to students as independent learners and independent readers. As you can see there, they're responsive to students' interests and needs, to support independent reading and lifelong learning, assist students in becoming active learners who have the opportunity to lead their learning. And those are eerily similar. They echo some of the descriptors in Standard 2 student learning as well. And the other section with the 4 bullets at the bottom have to do with the quality of the facility and the services it offers.
So now we'll get into the different interpretations of Principle 4.4 and why there's this gray area where a lot of us are like, well, how can this happen when, aren't they going to lose their NEASC accreditation, or how are they cutting it? And they have a NEASC visit coming up. So we'll talk a little bit about the schools that we have kind of highlighted. So right here we have our different CPS interpretations of what their interpretation of is an adequate certified licensed personnel. And these are different schools within New England that we've relabeled. So the first school is a school that we have visited. There's 60 pre-K through 12 students. At their collaborative visit, there was no certified library media specialist. The lessons were taught collaboratively through the classroom teachers and a tutor that did some work in what was a shape of a library. And then they had some books that were in an outdated, inadequate collection. When the NEASC committee left, they recommended that a full-time certified library media specialist be hired. And the school did hire a certified library media specialist. You could see with 60 students, they needed to budget. So they did a 0.5 library and then 0.5 technology, extended learning, and they have another part to their position. The second school is a much larger school. It has over 2,000 students. It's also a 9 through 12 high school. They have a district library coordinator who is responsible for purchasing and writing and aligning their curriculum. They have a brand new school building, but the library media center sits very empty. Students are not accessing the media center during their study halls, before or after school. They can access it with a class, like with their teachers during a class. But otherwise, when the visiting team went, it was a very empty, beautiful, lovely space that did not have students in it. which I know many of us in Connecticut are very jealous of. Massachusetts has a different protocol for their updates on buildings. So a lot of Massachusetts schools do see updates in new buildings where we don't, but there's library media center is sitting empty. I'll have Fran talk about School C, because this is a school that he had visited, and this is likely an ideal situation, but they did, eliminate the position, but it was a purposeful elimination.
Thank you, Jessica. Yes, this school is one that is very advanced, very well respected in Massachusetts and beyond. They provide a lot of insights. They have field trips from other school teams to their school. They're really avant-garde. I can't speak of them highly enough in terms of the things they do. So imagine my surprise when I learned that they no longer had a library media specialist. That required what we call commission-directed visit, and it required them to file a report called the substantive change. So a little bit about the school first, and I can tell you what happened with them. They eliminate the position, they file the change, which was due within 60 days of the occurrence, and they did follow that guideline. They let us know in that report that they want to reimagine the library media center. They don't know whether they'll call it a digital common, a learning commons, but they knew that there was a lot of resources that are available now in so many different forms of media, that they felt that there's got to be a way to modernize what they had. Since they don't have the library media specialist anyway, they sort of had an amber light to explore this. The superintendent, the board, and the community wanted to know that they got maximum bang for their buck. So they had basically a vision quest. They put together stakeholders out of the faculty, student body, they had administrators, parents, other community members, and they genuinely reimagined it. All of what they did is actually documented on a website dedicated to this, if you're ever interested. So they finally figured out what they wanted, and they held interviews. But here's the thing: they had no intention of restricting who they interviewed in terms of having specific categories of people. In other words, they didn't limit it to those with the library. In fact, they didn't even limit it to professional educators. They had every walk of life represented you can imagine. As long as they were credentialed in some way, they had a resume that suggested that they might be good to help the school meet this vision they have. So I don't know the full array of different professionals or individuals that they interviewed, but it was done by committee, representative of each of these stakeholders I mentioned, these focus groups. And in the end, the perfect person that they found with the right level of enthusiasm, vision, imagination, skills, eloquence was a school library media specialist certified in the state of Massachusetts. So they currently have a school library media specialist there. And I was very happy to hear that. But I get reminded when I see the principal once in a while that they could have easily had someone else, but this particular person just really outshined the rest. So the moral of the story here was it looks like if this could be a litmus test for a question that we might have of ourselves as library media specialists: would I fit the profile that schools and communities might look for in the future, get with all the abilities that technology can lend students and teachers together? Can we still maintain a leadership role, a role of guidance in that? And according to this school, yeah, the answer is yes. Thanks, Jessica.
So I'll have Fran talk a little bit about some good news that's coming your way. And I should say, I'll go back to this one. All three of these schools, even with their eliminated positions, they're all still NEASC accredited. Submitting the substantive change form, finding ways around making sure that their books were purchased by someone who was certified, making sure that, finding the ins and outs. They're still certified. It may not, they may be developing in that area. There's different, just like we rate our students, there's a rating scale for NEASC also. So it may not be an area that they're getting a glowing report back on, where they need to do some work, but they are still NEASC accredited, even though they do not have a certified library media specialist. But there is some good news. There's some language changes coming that Fran can share.
Thank you, Jessica. So I've been involved in not only the most recent iteration of the principle of effective practice concerning school library media centers, hence library information services. That list of different aspects that the professional needs to be able to deliver was something that a subcommittee of the Commission on Public Schools had decided. I was their facilitator. So as a member of the professional staff, I'm not the decision maker. I can only bring things to them for consideration, let them talk about it. And one of the things they agreed to do, if you ever have a chance to see the 220 standards versus the 2023 standards, there's a change there already. And what it included was the very things you see in that bulleted list below, which is exactly what is in the 2023 standards. Actively engage in the school's curriculum development and instructional practice to support teachers, etc. I read all that before. So I was then tasked, since that went well, to lead a subcommittee on revising the commission's policy handbook. And in it, there's an area called the guidelines for expectations for member schools. In other words, we're telling schools that want to be or maintain their membership, their accreditation with NEASC, that we have certain expectations of you. For instance, we expect every school to have a nurse. We expect every school to have a certain ratio of school counselors. Some of us still call them guidance counselors, school counselors to students. We took that ratio from the American Association of School Counselors. The elements that you see at the bottom of this slide, and you saw a little earlier this evening in the bulleted list of attributes that a professional staff member should offer, those came out of your national organization, your national organization for school librarians. So we didn't just make this up. We used some good resources, as a good library media specialist should. So as you look at this, it says that each member school should have, they all say should, by the way, the nurse too, a full-time certified school library media specialist. So that's pretty easy, but this is a change. The previous set of policy guidelines said that all secondary schools should, with a student population of over 300. And now we change it to every member school should. But the word should was still there. I want you to know that. If the school does not meet this guideline, it'll be asked to demonstrate that the following library information services are being provided. And of course, right out of the standards, they receive their library information services from adequate certified licensed personnel possessing expertise in literature, research, technology, and inquiry. I'll come back to that in 1 second. And then, of course, there's the items that the individual or group of professionals should have and be able to deliver. If you look at the very bottom one, this is something that we think is really important, that the library media center is open throughout the school day and before and after school. So when anytime a team goes in or the commission is reviewing a progress report from a school, if any of this is missing, then they're asked to provide information on it in a follow-up report that we call a special progress report. So here's what we're up against. We maintain that we don't prescribe to schools how exactly they solve the problems, as long as all of the services are provided. A tangential example: they don't have a school nurse, but they have Dr. O'Connor. She's a retired physician who still has maintained her her credentials in the state as a medical doctor. So she's in for 4 hours a day, and then the last few hours is a paramedic in there. Now we look at that, and they're able to explain how they can cover all of the services that are necessary, but they don't have a nurse, they don't have an RN, they don't have an LPN. School counselors, that we have certain ratios, but we'll find a school that doesn't meet the ratio. So that will say something like, you should have this. If you don't have this, explain how you do all these things that school counselors do. Of course, we took that off the most recent handbook for school counselors that were published by the National Association. And it's possible that a school that might be, oh, I don't know, let's say they have 2 counselors and there's 700 students. That ratio is too high. But they also say, but we have an adjustment counselor, and we might be able to understand that they split up their finances a little bit differently based on their needs. Going back to library media specialists, one of the reasons why I believe that the flexibility is important is because there are a lot of states that have a lot of towns that simply can't afford them. There's if you think about the upper tier of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, some of those schools have very few kids in them. It's amazing that they still have a high school or even a middle school. They haven't regionalized yet. And so they're making choices between having their skeleton crew of staff reduce some more, or simply not opening the position for a school library media specialist. But that doesn't get them off the hook. They still need to deliver all of those services. Imagine a school that simply, even in Connecticut, where the money is a little better for public schools. Not much lately, I know, but it's better. What will they do if they simply can't find one? We're kind of a shortage area. It's like trying to find a physics teacher or somebody who can teach French 5. Good luck with that. So sure, once things get resettled, and I know some of you probably or know a friend or maybe have this concern yourselves that perhaps we will end up with no job next year based on the way the budget proposals are going. But it's conceivable that when you go to find another job, it may not be as competitive as you might have thought once you get there. So what we wanted to say was, how can a school still meet this principle of effective practice, or at least do it some justice, do the kids some justice without an actual certified library media specialist? And we open up the room. We leave room for some creativity. Maybe they have the English department chair in there in the morning, who has a tremendous background with literature of all genres. Maybe the integration specialist is in there for part of the day. Perhaps the person handling the collection for career and college counseling is in there. So I can imagine a team of maybe 6 people being able to cobble something together with maybe a paraprofessional included in there to make sure it opens before and after school. But as I explain this to principals and superintendents who reach out to me with the same question you have, what do we do if it's the other side of the equation? If we can't find somebody, or we can't get somebody, or not allowed to hire somebody, I like to point out through all that discussion that it's probably easier just to find a library media specialist who can do it all. So I hope it's flattering to know that we think it would take about a half a dozen people to possibly even come close to what you do. And I'm very sensitive to that myself. So anyways, these are within policy, and it is an expectation of membership. If they don't meet that expectation, they need to report to us that they're not doing it. The question might be, what happens next if they neither have a library media specialist, nor are they delivering all these services? We'll answer that before this session's over. Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah, and what we're going to build on next, I love when Fran and I first sat down to talk about this. He said, being a library media specialist is the best job because you have complete autonomy in the building. But that can sometimes be like the most challenging part of advocating for your position too, is because no one knows what you do all day, but you're busy all day long. So I just thought this quote was so poignant right now, because it truly is. It's not the space, it's us. So I wanted to break down The first part of the standard, so having an adequate certified licensed personnel and support staff. So one of the very first things that you can do is to advocate and to really just be transparent. So when you have one way you can use your NEASC information, is there when you have your collaborative visit coming up, you will have a survey data. Look through that survey data, and I actually have a little screenshot of it. They'll have a family survey, a student survey, and a faculty survey. And taking a look at that and just analyzing where you can make some improvements, where you maybe like need to make communication better. One of the questions on the faculty survey is the library open before and after school? And in this school it is, but 3 people said it's not. So then it's like, is that a misunderstanding? Is it a miscommunication? So figuring out where you need to work, and then looking at your student data and figuring out what your student needs are, whether it's creating a more extensive survey, because you can see there's limited questions that they give students and teachers. There's 3 questions for faculty and 2 for students. So just trying to find out more information, but really taking this data and using it for your benefit. There's a school that's going up for their collaborative visit right now who took this data, and they're putting forth and recommending that they add another full-time library media specialist to their school based off of the data that came from all of their stakeholders. So this data is important, and it's something that you can use. Along with that is you can, along with being transparent, is to create mid-year and end-of-year surveys to evaluate your own value and what you value. I took a really hard look at myself and the support staff that was working in my space 2 years ago, and put out a student and faculty survey. And it really looked at it was so looking at everything to the point where when my support staff looked at it, but the comment was, oh my gosh, aren't you scared about what's going to come back? Because they thought it had come from the administrators. And I said, no, I said, the only people looking at this survey right now is I'm looking at it. I'm going to share it with our administrators. I said, but I want to know if a kid's not comfortable or says that I smile more at like this group of students instead of that group of students, I want to know that information. And so that's just one survey that I put together, but I literally combed through research of college surveys, and I'm sure now that AI exists, it could probably make us a much better survey. But I put in something that I've used. And I really think we need to show our worth. I think that because we do so much, we're not great advertisers of what we're always doing, because as soon as we complete one thing, we're on to the next thing. And we put everyone else first, and we put ourselves second in that spot. So I think keeping yourself, what you do, transparent. So I keep my calendar transparent for the sheer fact of I also keep my to-do list on my calendar, and I keep everything that I'm doing with students, doing with teachers, everything's on my calendar, and I have recurring events that pop up. So if someone needs to meet with me, or my admin needs to see how busy I am or how I'm spending my time, it's continually in my calendar. You can also, I create strategic plans that I share out to hold myself accountable. I make sure that I'm sharing out to my stakeholders the books that I'm reading, the PD that I go to. And when I have my mid-year and end of the year meetings, I have, my goals that I'm sharing out that have to align with certain things. But at the end of the day, I'm bringing data. So on to the next part where it talks about what you're collecting. You have to think about what you value and what your school values. And so I'm pulling collection reports as far as, we use Follett. So the title wise, how it's updating, I'll pull, and then, my title wise has every year. So I'll go all the way back to 2019 when I started and show how it's improved. Circulation reports, database usage reports, and then I can link them specifically all the way to what I've done. Okay, well, I can see that there was a big jump in my usage of this database because I rolled it out to this class, which was an assured experience. I've even tracked my use of my Instagram interactions to make sure that I'm like hitting my targets, and it's students that are interacting with my Instagram, and shared it out with my administrators just to make sure that I'm hitting all the right pieces. So I really think just being transparent and keeping a paper trail of everything that we're doing, so people see that we're valuable in the building. The next standard that I built out, so ensure personnel and staff are actively engaged. And I know this is one of those things that I know so many of us can add on to. So it's one of those things that I know we could sit around in a roundtable event and probably come up with 100 more. And this, I definitely think could be built out as a topic at CASL at our annual conference. But I really think the most important thing is to listen first. Getting a seat at the table is not always easy. So I think knowing your audience in front of you is vital. So I know it was my predecessor when I started at my building. One of the things the team told me, they said, "Oh, we love Nancy because she always came with candy." So I knew that with a certain team that when I showed up, the expectation was that I always showed up with candy. We had a Keurig in our space, and that was the only clean Keurig in the building, and everyone came in, and it was my opportunity to make sure that I had books that were highlighted for teachers on the wall, anything that was brand new, I made sure that I updated displays that were right in front of the Keurig, or I would try to tag teachers in when they came to make their coffee. Now with that gone, I have to be, we're in a new building, which is set up very differently. It has to be slightly more creative. So thinking about getting a seat at the table and then being the one that's always the most cordial person there, whether you're showing up with the candy or the coffee or the extra supplies for everyone, but then showing up and being present, and then being a good listener. Because I think that we're often looked to be the curriculum leaders, but I think we need to be also the listeners when we sit at the table, especially when it comes to other people's curriculum, and listen and then offer support. Another big thing is making collaboration easy, as far as whether it's something that they can take away with them, something that's an easy lift, or something that is making, I always say, if someone's going to plan with me, I will take something off of their plate when we work together. So if I'm taking and prepping all of the materials, or if I'm scoring something for them, I always honor everyone's time by trying to strike that balance. So just trying to not make it extra work to collaborate with me. And then I think it goes a long way to just send that extra email or write that note at the end. I have fun pencils that just have little sayings on them that I'll leave and just let people know that I appreciate them working with me. And I think this is a big one too, is to meet people where they are. Some collaboration, you're going to be co-teaching and it's going to be completely cohesive. And then others, they might sit in the back and correct papers the first time you meet with them. And then you know where you're starting. Others, they want to send kids down, and then you have to figure out how to work with getting them to come into your space, or getting into their room. But meeting people where they are, because at least they're interested in what you're doing. And no collaboration where you're meeting with kids is a loss in my book. So I think honoring where people are in their journey of collaboration, and just trying to like inch closer to getting to what we know is the highest level of support for teachers and students um, is the goal, but just working at everyone's own level. Um, the biggest, and this is my hardest thing, is making sure that I follow up later and then follow through with what I'm asked. I'm constantly carrying my phone with me. I don't know if anyone else, or my to-do list, because you're always asked in a million places to get something for someone. Um, and then being visible out on in your space, and then creating space if your space provides for it, for teacher collaboration and for teachers also. So your space is not just for your students. And so this next one, getting into the professional support to ensure high quality instruction, research techniques, um, citing sources and accessing literature. I kind of broke this into two different points, because I think a lot of it, we really are experts in this space, but I think a lot of it comes down to we're juggling so many things at once. It comes down to the planning and negotiating the planning. So as far as making sure that we're providing the curriculum support, is knowing your curriculum calendars, knowing when teachers are meeting to start something new, and then reaching out to teachers and blocking that time off. So you're following up and say, hey, I know your team has an upcoming unit. Can I start a book list for you? Can I have this new database, or there were some updates to the database that I'd like to work with your students on, and just kind of get that ball rolling. So that's part of your routine every time something new is coming up, as far as research in one of their subject areas. I know in our district, we also have like a curriculum coordinating council. I don't know if that exists in a lot of districts, but knowing what's the changes that are being made at the curriculum level, and as far as the curriculum changes that happen for summer planning, having a seat at the table when those changes are being made, so you can be written into curriculum. And then I'm not going to read all of it, but just because I know we're getting short on time and I want to honor questions, but making sure to be the expert. And I really think there's a big win with meeting with other librarians. Attending nerd camp and just like sitting next to someone, driving in the car with another librarian to go someplace. I recently, someone in the Farmington Valley arranged a little round table, and just having an hour to sit and say, oh, well, we do this and we did this. My middle school colleague and I went back to our school, and we're like, oh my gosh, we need to revise our research. Everyone else is so much more advanced than we are. And I mean, it wasn't even PD. It was purely a conversation with colleagues and just sharing out what other people are doing. And it was so eye-opening that we came back and met with teachers in our building and met with each other. And now we're on this ad hoc committee to try to revise what we're doing. So I think you think it's really small, and it's not like a big conference that you're going to, and it's not a big name, but even those small little pieces, I think, have a big payout in the end. All right. I'll let you read this, because again, I want to honor, because I know we might have questions about putting kids first. If anyone has questions, I do have a library advisory board, but I know a lot of people in CASL have library advisory boards and do it much better. And then the facility, that's a good thing. When people go on, when the visiting team goes to your facility, if it needs work, that they're going to tell you. And then I put some resources in there. All right. So we'll open it up for questions, especially since you have Fran here, because Fran's not normally available to all the librarians.
I don't know if it might help get things going a little bit if I can just say one more thing that's kind of packed, but I'll make it quick. Make yourselves indispensable. And I'm thinking of the person who supervised and evaluated my school library media specialists. There wasn't a thing that I could get engaged in that library media specialist, there's a few of them over the years, didn't step right up and say, hey, I want to be involved in the new capstone program. I could run it right from the library media center. I want to be involved in the upcoming NEASC visit. I heard that some people from the state are coming. Maybe I could help. Instructional rounds. We could host it right here in the library media center. And there's anything that comes up. If you're there, you become indispensable if you're really driven to do that. There was a few sayings, and I hope they still exist, Louise, to say that the library media center is an extension of the classroom and is the curricular hub of the building. I, for one, am not letting NEASC forget about that, nor any of our member schools.
It's the wait time. You've given us so much to think about. I mean, just some examples of what's going on out there, the scenarios. Jessica, so many different ideas for us to all include. I guess, Fran, I mean, I have a question. If your school library does all of this and they still decide to cut your position, I mean, it's
Right.
disheartening. And I know that at my school they're gonna patch something together. Somebody has, been alternate route to certification, and so that person is gonna cover, like when the NEASC visit happens, they've got one in the building. So
Yeah, and that's very unfortunate. I think there are plenty of cases I can think of over the 8 years I've been with NEASC where I learned about tremendous library media specialists who still ended up on the tough side of the budget cut there. And I think some of these decisions are made based on optics. I think that perhaps there are school districts that are thinking about, oh, we're going to cut this many elementary classroom teachers, these many high school classroom teachers. So we have to look at some of the services too. So they see what I'm sure they call it, if they don't say it out loud, low hanging fruit. Oh, well, this person may be valuable to the school. So that's I guess my advice would be to be proactive ahead of time and try to be a tremendous asset to the school. In other words, make it really hard for them to make that decision. Make it almost impossible. And I think that's probably the best advice I can give you. And I think the standard and the principles therein give a pretty good blueprint, as Jessica just annotated. I saw
yeah,
somebody with a hand up.
thanks, Fran. Yes, there's a hand up. And so can I just add too? So those pinned, you want to make sure that you're doing everything you possibly can. April is School Library Month, and you want to promote, advocate. There's so much good stuff in there. So everybody needs to make sure that they do as much as they can, not just in April, through the whole year, but for now, right now, for sure.
Isn't it some comfort to know that they may have let me go, but it wasn't my fault. They made a bad decision.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Vanessa.
Hi. So I have a somewhat selfish question, but I was just wondering about looking at the standards. Is there a way that they sort of weigh or balance them? So in my position, we do a lot with research, but are not necessarily able to then be responsive or as involved with like independent reading. So when they have a NEASC visit, because ours is coming up soon, and they're kind of assessing those pieces, is there a way that they look at like weighting that, or is it sort of just, okay, there's a little bit here, but the majority is in the research, so we're kind of good to go?
Yeah, I guess I can answer that one for you easily. The team comes in with the glass half full. It's a growth mindset, and they'll listen to your story or your school story. For example, Vanessa, in your school, we have other people who are handling the reading part, and they bring them to the school library media center to pursue their individual reading interests. But a lot of the demand for my services happens to be in the research realm. That's okay. That's you're meeting your school's needs, and the visiting team would see that. We try to get school library media specialists on these visits whenever possible. So you'll probably see a kindred spirit there, and if not, at least somebody who worked very closely with someone in your profession, so they'll understand it. There'll always be somebody on the team who understands. So don't. And I guess what I want to tell you, Vanessa, and everyone else on screen, is they're not coming to really evaluate your program. They're coming out to give you feedback on what you're doing. So I suppose that it's possible. I guess I've seen this in the past a long time ago, where the team did discover that a school library media specialist was not in Connecticut. I'm happy to report wasn't really doing what that person needed to do, and so they made recommendations related to it. But that was a very unique anomaly, and it usually you find support rather than any questions that make you feel tripped up. So just tell your story, Vanessa. I'm sure you're doing the right thing, and they'll understand that.
I can probably add on also. I happen to know Vanessa's unique situation, where she's in a position and looking to make sure that she's doing more of the other side. So I think the biggest thing too is when your NEASC visit is coming, that you make sure that you're part of the team that's writing the standard, that you with transparency see what the survey says, the staff survey, the student survey, and then when the interviews are happening, just make sure that you have a voice at the table when they're doing observations, that they're coming through and observing in the library. They'll see all those pieces, and if you specifically want to make your case known, there's so many times, and Fran, this is probably how many, you've been on many more visits. Almost every visit I've been on, a teacher has come up to me or a staff member and said, "Come here, I need to tell you something." And so, because they need their truth to be heard. So if there's something that you are hoping to get out, you're probably not the only one. So it will probably make itself known in the self-report regardless. I know as we're writing ours in Farmington, I'm on the team that's reviewing it, and it's already being everything that I would want to be in there. Our team has already written, but definitely your truth. You have a space to say it when the team comes.
I think Pamela had something.
Hi. I am probably in an extremely unique situation. In Watertown, we had always had 4 librarians in 5 schools. Last year in May, the superintendent needed to make cuts and cut 2 of the 4 of us. And I am currently covering 4 buildings, grades 3 through 12. So my high school currently only gets me 1 day a week. NEASC is coming soon. I'm not sure when it is, but they're starting to get the committee together. I'm just looking for a little hope. Are we going to have a hard line on some of this? Is there potential for them to look at this and say, what is going on? The library is only open school hours 1 day per week to students. And the entire book budget was cut. I wasn't able to order any new materials. Half the databases were cut from the budget because of usage data from the year before I was there. And 4 years ago, we had a fabulous 6 through 12 program that was flourishing. Is there a way for me to somehow get the data out and how much we've lost? Will that matter in this?
Well, if I may,
Okay.
yeah, so, and this might touch upon Vanessa's question as well. When the visit occurs, both the collaborative conference visit and
Mhm.
the annual accreditation visit, you'll find that I just realized I have to go soon. You'll find that you'll be lumped in with the school nurse, the school counselors, and all the other service groups.
Mhm.
You should request a meeting
Okay.
with some team members and to explain what's going on. Also, at this point, when you're about to start your self-reflection, you
Mm.
need to be loud and clear to make sure that information gets into the self-reflection.
Because I can see that they're going to find ways to say, oh, but our language arts department is handling that. Or, like there's going to be a lot of, depending on how serious the recommendations are, they're going to find ways around this too. And it's such a disservice. I want to make sure that I'm promoting it the best that I can, since the only other librarian does pre-K to 2 and I do the rest of the district.
Yeah, I mean, there are some scenarios, I think, Pamela, where you could have maybe 3 librarians for 2 schools, or maybe the one librarian for a small high school and a small middle school that's
Right.
bolstered with other professional staff members who kind of fill in. But in my mind, if I was a chair of that team, I'd be questioning why they're doing it the way they do it. They're doing it, and I think one thing I do want to say, I meant to get this out earlier, is that when the school doesn't meet one of these expectations for membership, like
Okay.
not having a nurse or a school library media specialist, it never ends for them. Unfortunately, they're caused to write that substantive change report we mentioned. But then the commission often sends a team on a commission directed visit to the school
Okay.
to be there in the flesh with one
Okay.
commission member and one staff member like me, and we say, what's going on with the library media area? And then they end up having to respond to special progress reports until they resolve it.
Perfect.
Once it's created as a recommendation, it's never over until it's completed. They have to
Okay.
find a way to complete it. And the way you described your situation, that would be in progress at best. If they would need to fix that dramatically to fix it.
Okay. All right. That gives me hope. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't see any other hands raised. Fran, you said you had to head out and it's 7:37. I see that Jenny, our CASL president, has written, we will have 2 librarians for 4 schools next year.
Yeah.
No LMS in the middle school, high schools. Yeah. Same thing in Naugatuck. No school certified school librarians in 2 intermediate schools, none middle school, high school, none, just in the elementary schools. So
If you have an accredited school that's affected, you might want to ask your principal point blank if she or he has submitted their report of substantive change. And
yeah.
even if it happened 5 years ago, that means they're 5 years late, and they need to report that. We can't just be surprised at the visit to find out that they're not meeting one of the expectations of membership.
We can hear you, Jenny. Go ahead. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So keep working hard, everybody.
Thank you so
What a
much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Fran.